So, I have a story to tell you about the next speaker. It's a behind-the-scenes story. So I'm going to tell you a little story about the Chief Sustainability Officer for United Technologies Incorporated. His name's John Mandyck. Here's the story. March the 8th, I am doing a briefing meeting online, on the phone, with John, and he's in this conversation, and we're talking about what we're doing and the behind the scenes. We're basically planning this little segment. And so he said to the organizers, what's happening to the leftover food at lunchtime? There was this kind of quiet on the phone line. And they said, oh, good point. And he said, I could help you work out where to take the leftover food. And that was on March the 8th. Today's March the 30th. I can tell you that the leftover food that you didn't finish, that we may have back there, is going to DC Central Kitchen. So, right? That's how easy it is to affect change. Ask the question, give some advice, follow it through. Took a couple of days for that to happen. So I want you to see what walking the talk looks like. John Mandyck, we're watching your walk.
Thank you, Femi. It's great to be here. I invite you for the next 5 minutes to join me in thinking differently for how we can sustainably feed our planet. Because at this very moment, I can point to a hidden source of food that can feed 4 billion more people. And would you believe me if I told you that hidden source of food saves enough carbon to remove every car off of every road every year? And would you believe me if I told you that hidden source of food saves enough water to fill the entire water needs for the continent of Africa? Would you believe me? So what is this hidden source of food? Is it some type of freak science? Is it something from outer space? No. This hidden source of food is hiding in plain sight because it's the food that we waste, lose, and throw away each and every day. And if you think the problem is bad now, it's about to get a whole lot worse. Because today we live on a planet of 7 billion people. About half of us live in cities. But in just 35 years, we're going to grow our population 35%. And at that point in 2050, nearly 70% of all the people on the planet will live in cities. Meaning two things. We're going to have many more people to feed, and those people are moving farther and farther away from their food sources. So let's talk about food. And any conversation about food has to be a conversation about agriculture and farming like we're having here. Farming is the largest human endeavor on Earth. We literally move more land, we literally alter the face of our planet through farming than we do anything else. In fact, we use 38% of our ice-free land to farm. If you take all the cities in the world and you put them together, they use 2% of our ice-free land compared to farming. So we use a lot of land, and I'm going to show you we use a lot of resources. And the ugly, ugly, ugly truth is we throw away about 40% of our food. 40% of our food never makes it from our farm to our fork. And this is the hidden opportunity, because we grow and produce enough food on this planet to feed 10 billion people. We live on a planet of 7 billion people, and we know only about 6 billion are getting enough food. That 40% inefficiency is the food that's lost or wasted along the way. And I challenge all of you to think about where else in society we tolerate 40% inefficiency in anything. If today we only got 60% of our emails, a lot of us might be happy about that. But in reality, my company couldn't open, your bank couldn't work, National Airport couldn't fly airplanes. We don't tolerate 40% inefficiency in anything except the one resource we need to sustain the human race. We need to waste less food so we can feed more people. It's that simple. 1 in 9 people will go to bed hungry tonight. That's the social penalty that we're paying for this inefficiency in the system. That's what we've been talking about at this conference. Before I tell you about the environmental penalty, it might be helpful to say, where do we waste this food? 1/3 happens at the consumer level, but 2/3 happens at the production and distribution level, where food rots in poor transportation networks or open-air markets. It has a big environmental footprint. The UN tells us that the carbon footprint of food waste is 4.4 billion metric tons. What does that mean? Well, if you measured food waste as a country, it would be the world's 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases behind China and the United States. So there's a carbon impact, but there's a water impact. Of all the water on the planet, just 1.3% is fresh water. We then take 70% of that to grow our food. And then we throw 40% away. And we wonder why we live in a water drought world. I'm convinced that we can sustainably feed this planet, and the solution is hiding in plain sight. We have got to stop wasting our food supply that has the capacity to feed 10 billion people. We need a paradigm shift. Paradigm shifts like that start in rooms like this. So I'm very optimistic about our future, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with Femi.
I am convinced that we can sustainably feed this planet. How?
How? Well, we need to change the paradigm. I mean, think about this, and pardon the analogy, but what we've been talking about today is the global agricultural system, and it's an amazing system. But pardon the analogy, think about it, if it was a car, what have we been talking about? We've been talking about fine-tuning the engine, maybe changing the engine, putting new tires on the car. But guess what? That car's not going to take us where we need to go because we're leaking 40% of the fuel out of the gas tank. We can't put enough tires and engines on the global agricultural system if we don't address the 40% leakage out the back.
That doesn't answer how.
How we do it.
It's a great analogy.
How we do it.
I picture the problem. I'm not picturing the solution.
The solution, you have to look at those two levels. At the consumer level, we have to engage in consumer education. It's hard, but it can be done. In doing research for my book, I found that in the United Kingdom, there's a great program. The last 10 years, they've reduced consumer food waste by 20%. It can be done. And we're seeing the early steps of that in the United States. But the 2/3 of the problem, that's where companies like mine get involved. We have to look at the production, the distribution, the logistics, the cold chain, how we address that 2/3 of food waste that's really happening in the production and distribution level in the emerging economies. To do that, we have to free up access to capital to smallholder farmers. We heard conversations about that today. One great way to do that is to think about food waste through the climate prism, because it will unlock climate financing and climate policies to do something about it.
Why is it that food waste has such a large carbon footprint, John?
Well, it takes a lot of energy to grow and produce our food. So think about fuel for tractors, electricity for water pumps, diesel fuel to move food on our roads and trucks. All of that, it's very, very carbon intensive. If you roll all of that up, it gets to that 4.4 billion metric tons. So there's a lot of carbon in the food, but more than that, what it really speaks to is the amount of food that's wasted every year. It's 1.3 billion metric tons. Think about an elephant weighs a metric ton. Think about 1.3 billion happy, healthy elephants standing in one pile. That's the amount of food waste we create every year.
What's your house look like, John? This is all sounding amazing. It's fantastic. I did tell you that little story about he actually walks the talk. I'm just curious about how you do it in your house.
How we do it in my house, you know, looking at that consumer level, how do you address food waste? You have to change consumer behavior. So when I became familiar with this issue, you know, before when I would go to the grocery store, I would shop with my eyes. And that's natural. I think most people do. And it's not by accident that the first aisle you walk into in a grocery store, at least in the United States, is the produce aisle, the vegetables, the fruits, because it's the most beautiful. Food is beautiful, so I would pick it up, put it in my cart, pick it up, put it in my cart. Pretty soon my cart is overflowing, and I'd go home and then realize, oh, I'm going to be in Washington at a conference. My wife has an after-work dinner meeting, my kids are playing soccer and eating at somebody else's home, and we're throwing away 40% of our food. So today, it's just pretty simple. I shop with a plan. If I don't know what I'm doing with the item that I pick up, it doesn't go in the cart. It's a very small thing, but it's significantly changed the footprint in my house.
Has anyone seen this book? Okay, good. It hasn't gone missing in action.
Catherine's in the book.
Okay, excellent. This book is called Food Foolish. It's available at the conference. If you look at the back, it will tell you where all the proceeds are going.
To food charities like DC Central Kitchens.
And you wrote it because?
I wrote it because, look, this is a story that's not being told. I truly believe in this, that this is the hidden source that can sustainably feed our planet. And by the way, it's the pure definition of sustainability: avoid the waste. And there are analogies we can learn here from the energy efficiency movement. You know, over the last 20 years, there was the age of energy efficiency when, what did we do? Well, we spread more power across a growing society and a growing economy, so we didn't have to build more power plants and the resulting environmental emissions. We need to think about food the same way. We need an age of food efficiency, where we take the same base of food and spread it across the growing population and the growing society and the growing economy without creating additional environmental consequences. That's the way we can look at this issue. That's the opportunity in front of us.
There were three stats that stood out for me: 10 billion, 7 billion, 6 billion. Remind us of those, because those are ones that should be seared into our memory.
Yeah, and that's the one that convinced me that we need a different paradigm. We grow and produce enough food to feed 10 billion people. Just remember that. Today, we live on a planet of 7 billion people, and only about 6 billion are getting enough food. That's the 40% inefficiency. We have enough food right now to feed everybody on this planet and everybody that will join us by 2050 if we think differently about it.
John Mandyck, thank you for walking the talk.
Thank you.